She's also a community advocate at heart, and the ability to impact the next generation of leaders continues to drive her passion for higher education and citizen engagement. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you LaShondra Little.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming to this special voter forum. You did just hear from the second vice president, Kiana Butler, but I do want to recognize the leadership of the Atlanta Suburban Alumnae Chapter that is in the actual room. So Sabrina Clark serves as president, and I did see her come in. And Tamara Trammell serves as our first vice president. I know our president is doing double duty. I don't know if Sora Trammell is as well. I don't know if they wanted to pop in, say hello. If not, we can have them at the end. And then this is also a part of our May week. I'm saying our because I am a member of this chapter for those who, the visitors that we do have from the public. But I do want to recognize the chairs of the May week committee for having me do this forum. And that is Daphne Ware and Charcia Nichols, who are on as well. So we are going to go ahead and get started. And so we're going to go through a brief sort of presentation, and then Sharice Reyes will come in and sort of talk about the ballot questions. And then we're going to open it up sort of freestanding for you all to ask questions. And then you all will be able to enjoy the remainder of your day. Okay, so again, for those who are just coming in the room, I serve as the voter education and outreach manager for the Department of Registration and Elections for Fulton County. And what my team does is that we make sure in a nonpartisan manner that we educate everybody within Fulton County limits, which is about 538 square miles. So it's massive. You can see the map on the screen. And so we go as far as north in Milton and as far south as Palmetto. And our job is just to make sure everyone is educated and knows about the election process, voter laws, voter rules. And so we're going to quickly have this discussion tonight about how we navigate this presidential election. And so we start with, what are the requirements to be able to vote? Give me 1 second, guys. I'm in an office that is modernized, so I need to move. There we go. We can bring the lights back on. Okay. And so we first want to talk about who can vote in this upcoming election. And so in the state of Georgia, in order to be eligible to vote, you have to be a citizen of the United States, a legal resident of the state of Georgia and the county or municipality, at least 17 and a half years of age, but will turn 18 before the day of the election. And so if we're thinking about our high schools students right now, if they are born in October 2006 and above, they will be able to register to vote right now, because we know they will be 18 prior to the November election. You can't be serving a sentence for a conviction of a felony and have not been found mentally incompetent by a judge. If they meet this criteria, they can register to vote in the state of Georgia. Acceptable ID for voting. You do need ID now, whether you are voting in person or absentee by mail, you do still need ID. So that can be any valid state or federal issued ID. And so for those of us who might have moved to Georgia recently and have not had a chance to change over our driver's license from our previous state, you are able to still use that driver's license from out of state if it is not expired. You can use a Georgia's driver's license. Even if it's expired, you can use your University System of Georgia ID. So these are our state-funded schools. So think Georgia Tech, Georgia State, our HBCUs, Albany State, Savannah State, Fort Valley. Those students can use their IDs. Morehouse College, Spelman College, Clark Atlanta University, Oglethorpe, Emory, Agnes Scott, for example. Those are private institutions. Those students at those schools cannot use their college ID. Any valid employee photo ID from any branch of government. Again, I work for Fulton County. I can use my Fulton County ID. A valid U.S. passport, military ID, tribal ID, martyr ID. So there are even martyr cards that do have a photo ID. The only ID that you can use that is expired is your Georgia's driver's license. If for some reason you do not have any type of Georgia ID, the state of Georgia does offer free voter identification cards. The only way you can receive those cards is if you are registered to vote in that said county. So for example, in Fulton County, we can give out cards, but you have to be registered to vote. There are 3 ways to vote. So if you're like, how do I vote? There are 3 ways to vote. And this is in Fulton County, but this is also in our Clayton County as well, because we do cover Clayton County service area. So absentee in person. And so that is happening right now. Early voting started on April 29th and will end on May 17th. So that is absentee in person is also known as advanced voting. Absentee by mail, that is going on right now as well. You can request your applications. And then in person on election day. For this particular election coming up, election day is May 21st. And on election day, you do have to vote in your same precinct. For early voting in the state of Georgia, no matter what county in which you reside, you can register, you can actually vote at any of the county advanced voting facilities. This is Fulton County's carrier equipment. Most of the larger counties in the state do have these carriers, but this is just if you're new to the state and have not yet voted, this is what it looks like. And so we didn't want you to be surprised if you go to vote on election day. So I want to talk briefly about where we are in this season right now. And so this is what I like to call the playoff season. And when I say that, that is because all of our Republicans are duking it out against one another, as well as all the Democrats are duking it out against one another to determine who's going to be the one person to represent that party on the championship ballot, which is in November. And so that's what the season we're in right now is, what we like to call primary. The general election will be the one in November. And so for Georgia, we're open primary. So that means you don't have to designate yourself in the state of Georgia as a Democrat or a Republican. The only time you have to say anything that relates to a party is based on when you decide to choose your ballot. So for right now, during the primary season, when you go in to vote, there are 3 ballots that are going to be available. There is a Republican ballot, a Democratic ballot, and a nonpartisan ballot. Please understand, if you select the nonpartisan ballot, the only thing you will see are the judges and school board and any other sort of nonpartisan positions. But for Fulton County specifically, you're only going to see judges and you're only going to see school board. All the other positions are indeed partisan. What you also have to understand is whatever ballot that you choose in May, if there is indeed a runoff in June, you have to stick with that same ballot, i.e. you voted on a Democratic ballot in May. When there's a runoff, you have to have a Democratic ballot. The only time you can switch your ballot choice is if you did nonpartisan. So if you did a nonpartisan ballot in May, when you show up to the June runoff, you can switch. Well, you can say, now I want a Democrat or now I want a Republican. That's the only time in which you can change something. If whatever party you chose for your initial ballot, that will be the one you have to have in the runoff. What's on the ballot, this is going to be specific, and maybe so Reds, if she wants to touch on Clayton County, she can, but this is specific to, this is what's on the ballot for everyone, and then I have specifically Fulton County on the next slide. So this is a presidential preference year. So we'll have the president on the ballot, your United States representative, so that's your congressperson, your local state senator, your local state representative. Typically, we would have a U.S. senator, but based on the way their terms are, there is not a U.S. Senate. So that's why it's in red. There's not a U.S. Senate on this race this year. They will be back on the ballot in 2026. And we typically would have the Public Service Commission as well. But that had been in lawsuits, and that's why they're not on the ballot. So there will be a special election for this position next year in the month of June, with a primary, and then the actual general election for this will be held in November. For Fulton County on the ballot, we will have our Board of Commissioners, our Fulton County School Board, and then our district attorney, clerk of superior court, tax commissioner, sheriff, our solicitor, judge of probate court, Fulton County surveyor. And I would imagine in our other counties, these will be the same type of positions that will be on the ballot as well. And as you can see, these are all considered partisan, with the exception of the school board that is on this page. So again, for example, if you chose the nonpartisan ballot, if you're looking at this slide, the only thing you would see is the Fulton County School Board, the judge of probate court, and then there are some state court judge positions. Quickly, I want to just talk about redistricting, because we have been getting a lot of calls as people are going to the polls, and they're not, unfortunately, they're not going to my voter page first before they go. So every 10 years after the census, the Georgia General Assembly has to redraw our maps. They want to make sure with the population growth that each district is now equitable, that everybody has the same representation, the same, and it's even sort of across the board. And so the maps were redrawn in 2020 after the 20 census, and they went into effect for the 2022 general election. And so there were a lot of us then that were redistricted, and in that particular redistricting, it impacted our congressional seats, our local House and Senate seats, as well as our county commission, our city councils, and board of education. So that was already in place. After those maps were passed, there were several groups that then sued and said these maps violated the Voting Rights Act. A judge agreed and ordered our General Assembly to go into a special session, which took place in December, and said they needed to redraw the maps again. They needed to draw one majority Black district west of Atlanta, 5 new majority Black House districts, and 2 new majority Black Senate districts. And so redistricting has taken place again. For Fulton County, I will tell you there are 15 cities in Fulton County. 13 had redistricting. And so that means there are people who are going to the polls now that will have a new senator, a new House of Representative member, a new Congress, or all 3. And so it has been confusing. And so I want you all who are on this voter forum tonight to be able to be educated on this. And hopefully you will know to go to the My Voter page before you get to the polls. So you will know exactly what's on your ballot. You will know who represents you, and you'll be able to ask those questions. We're going to quickly talk about some resources available to you. So if you are within Fulton County, even if you don't live in Fulton County, it's still election news. You can download our Fulton Votes app. This gives you all the latest election news, wait time, sample ballots, any upcoming dates. You can check election results. Basically, anything related to elections is here. The My Voter page. So for those of us who have been in voter registration, doing outreach and social action activities as it relates to making sure we get our folks registered to vote, we always use this My Voter page. It has had an overhaul. So if you have not been on here recently, I encourage you to go to the My Voter page. And if you are, most of you all on here right now, take out your phone and go to mvp.sos.ga.gov, put in your first initial, your last name, the county in which you're registered, and your date of birth, so that you can see your voting history and see your information. This website has been, again, overhauled. So now when you log in, you no longer have to click a separate attachment to see a PDF pop-up to see your precinct card. You can now see that all on the main screen. As soon as you log in, if you've been voting in Georgia since 1986, it's going to show you your history of how long, every time you voted, where you voted, and if it, it's going to show you all of that. And so you're going to keep scrolling past that, and it's going to then show you your precinct. And then after that, it's going to show you all of your districts in which you reside. And then they are hyperlinked, so you can click them, and it'll actually take you to the person's page that currently represents you. Now, please remember, for the congressional seat, so your U.S. House of Representative, your state Senate, and your local House of Representative, redistricting just took place. And so for the purpose of this election, it's already updated. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm currently in District 13. However, due to the redistricting that had to take place in this special section, I'm in now the new Congressional District 6. So when I go onto the My Voter page, it's showing me that Rich McCormick is my representative. He is not, but he's currently the District 6 representative. David Scott still is my representative until December 31st. However, for the purpose of this election, I will have to vote on the people who are running in the new District 6. And so I know that can be confusing to some folks because they're like, who are these people, you know, on that I don't know, that we haven't seen before. And so we just wanted to make sure we touched on that so you can know, if you go to your My Voter page now, you can see what your districts are and that you would know as well.
And Sora Little, is it possible for us to, if you can go back to that slide, can we just take seriously like 3 minutes and have everyone go through that exercise, go to that My Voter page? Because again, there are people who were removed from the rolls in the state of Georgia who are still unaware that they were removed for the rolls. If you have recently moved and you need to update your voter registration, or if you don't know if you've been redistricted, we need you all, including our dedicated voters, to just go and be formed and check. And if you can put a thumbs up in the chat when you've checked to let us know that you've done that, if we can just, because it's really important, and that's something that we've been doing, and we're trying to get surveyed the number of people who are doing this, because we have so many people, we've seen this in our chapter, who have voted in every election who were still unaware that they're in new districts. So it's important not just that we do this when we're talking to consistent voters, but that you all are also talking to your family and friends, particularly anyone who you think you may have a difficult time in bringing back out to vote in this election in November, or quite frankly, some of these primaries in May. It's important that you all check right now. So if we can just take a pause, and Sarah Little, thank you so much for indulging me in that, because I know you asked everybody to take out their phones, but we need, this is about social action. So let's put some action in that social justice activity. Thank you so much. I see the thumbs are going up. Please check, check, check. We're going to give you another a minute or so to check that voter registration and give us a thumbs up that you've checked. You've ensured that your address is accurate. You've ensured that you know your polling precinct, that you know who your local and state and federal representatives are, and that you have a plan to vote in the primaries, that you have a plan to vote coming in November. It is time for some social action. The time is now. All hands are on deck. Sarah Little's going to get me in a minute and tell me to hush. Delta Sigma Theta is a nonpartisan organization, but we are not on the sidelines, people. And we encourage each and every one of you to not stand on the sidelines. These local elections coming up are the ones that are the most important to our day-to-day activities. And Sarah Little is speaking on behalf of Fulton County right now. So I'm going to go a little bit further and remind you, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, these questions, these important issues that are on the ballot impact our lives day to day, impact the lives of the people who look like us day to day. And so we can't stay on the sidelines. We need you to take that action. And I've talked long enough, Sarah Little. Thank you so much for indulging me. And now, again, continue checking that My Voter page while we're talking and put those thumbs up so that we can record that you have actually checked your voter registration during this forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Soraya. That was fine, because actually what people don't understand, oftentimes in the primary, you do get a Democratic ballot, and then in November there is the Republican challenger, and so you do have then the races decided in November. However, for several of the races that are on the ballot, there are no partisan oppositions, and so whoever wins this election in May, that is going to be the person who's going to be in that seat. And so that is another reason why we say local elections are important, because some of these people, it doesn't matter what happens in November, because they're already going to be, they would have won in the May. And so while we're on that, just the key dates, we sort of touched on some of these earlier, but the election date itself, again, is May 21st. There's an important deadline coming up this week, and that is Friday on May 10th. That is the last day. If you know you're not going to be able to vote early right now, by May 17th, and you know you're not going to be here on election day, May 21st, Friday is the last day, and this is no matter what county you live in, is the last day that you are able to request an absentee ballot. Friday is your last day. If there happens to be a runoff for this election, that date is going to be June 18th. The registration deadline for May 21st has passed, so you would have had to have registered by April 22nd in order to be able to fully vote on May 21st. However, because there is a federal race on the ballot, and that is our U.S. congressional seats, if there is a runoff that will be on the ballot, you get an additional time to register to vote. And so for those high school students and any other folks that we know who missed this April 22nd deadline, we do have the May 20th deadline. And if they are registered to vote by May 20th, if there is a congressional race within their district on the ballot for the runoff, they would be able to vote. And you will see we will be doing early voting June 8th through the 14th. Quickly, I'm just going to talk about legislation, starting with SB 202, because for some of our folks, we only vote for the presidential election, which means that there have been a lot of changes since 2020. And so just to touch on a few, we had a mobile unit. That mobile unit, if there was a line somewhere, we could go and sort of relieve that line, pull up with the mobile unit, and people could sort of transition and go vote using the mobile unit. Or if there was an area of town that didn't necessarily have an early voting location that seemed central, the mobile unit could go there, for example, and sort of, you know, give another place for people to be able to vote. They outlawed those mobile units, so they can no longer be used for voting purposes. So I know if you've seen me been out at events, we use them now for education purposes. For our drop boxes, we typically, so in 2020, we had drop boxes all over the county. They were outside, they were accessible 24 hours a day. That has changed. I think in 2020, Fulton County had about 38 drop boxes across the county. Now you can only have one drop box per 100,000 active registered voters within your county. So we have active voters right now, about 700, a little over 750,000 or so. So we get 7 drop boxes. They are no longer 24/7. They are now only going to be able to be used during early voting hours inside of early voting locations. And so that is a change. There was an ID requirement, I talked about it earlier, added to absentee. And typically in the past, when you voted by absentee, say for example, this is a primary year. So had you voted in the presidential preference primary in March, absentee, you would have automatically received your ballot for the rest of the cycle without having to ask. Now, unless you are over the age of 65, disabled, or in the military, you have to request the absentee application for every election. Those particular groups that I mentioned, they are able to opt in to automatically receive theirs. There is no interaction within 150 feet in our precincts. And then there was an additional Saturday and optional Sunday added to early voting. And then lastly was the change to out of precinct voting on election day. There were a lot of provisional ballots cast in 2020 out of precinct. So those were people who showed up to the wrong precinct, or they were too far away from their precinct and just decided to just go to the closest precinct to them to vote. Your vote typically counted during that 2020 period. Now, out of precinct voting, if you voting out of your precinct on election day, and you're within that county that you're registered in, it's going to count between the hours of 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. So that is why it is important that we tell people, and that's why I saw Ray's took the time to say, look at your My Voter page, so that way you know where your precinct is. Because on election day, you have to go to your assigned precinct. Early voting has become very popular in the state of Georgia, so much so last year, they did pass SB 129. So you as an employee in the state of Georgia now, you get 2 hours off to go vote during advance voting because it is that popular. Again, you need to work that out with the folks on your job. Now, just don't go walk out these people's jobs saying you're going to vote, but make sure that you make sure you talk that through and set your time out to be able to plan. That's part of planning your vote so that you actually can know when you can go. But what happens in Georgia, because so many people vote early, if by chance they don't vote early and they wait till election day, well, guess what? They go back to an early voting location. And so that's where that out of precinct again comes into play, because then now you're in a bind. You went to a place that's not even a precinct, and now you got to figure out, can I make it to my precinct, or, you know, what am I going to do? And so we encourage people vote early. That way you can be anywhere within your county and go vote, and you're going to see your ballot. And that way you're not worried about what may happen on election day. There were a couple laws that were passed this year that will go into effect July 1st. Governor Kemp actually signed all of these on yesterday, with the exception of 1312, which he signed as soon as it was passed. So I spoke about that. So the Public Service Commissioner for Districts 2 and 3 that had been in the court for a while. So we will now have a special June election next year with the primary on the 25th. There was for the paper ballots that we have been using, they will now be required to be a special watermark. And so the last time you will see the current ballots we are using right now will be for this election, because as of the November election, we're going to have to order new paper with a watermark. HB 1207, anybody who now works in elections has to be a U.S. citizen. And so that will probably impact some of the local election offices across the county. They gave more information on where poll watchers can be and what they could do. And then it also provided some protection for poll workers and election officials as well. And then SB 189 is a huge bill. They dropped a lot of this. That was this year's omnibus bill. They dropped a lot in it. One of the big things was that it removed the Secretary of State as a member of the state election board. And then it offered an opportunity that had not been available in Georgia for someone to be able to run for president if they were able to get put on the ballot in 20 other states. They would add them to the actual presidential ballot, which you couldn't happen before. There's some other things in terms of now on election day. So in November at 8 p.m. on November 5th, we have to make sure that we have reported, these are all election officials across the county now, all of the advanced voting votes, as well as all absentee that were received that Monday prior to election day, now have to be uploaded, tabulated, and sent out to the public by 8 p.m. And I'm now going to sort of stop my screen, and I'm going to shift over to Sora Reyes to briefly to talk about our ballot questions. And then we'll be able to open up, because I know you all have a lot of questions, because this is a lot of information. And so I want to do that right now and give her that opportunity to come on in.
Well, while you're doing that, Sora, you know I got to start with a little music. We're not bowing down to that either. I'm gonna stay. I can't sing, y'all. If I could, I would be singing this for y'all right now. Like Latasha Brown with Black Voters Matter, because she has the battle cry. It's the song Freedom that basically just summarized, we will not bow down to racism. We will not bow down to exploitation, and we will not bow down to Senate Bill 202 or any other bills that the Georgia legislature tries to pass to prevent us from voting, exercising our right to vote, and educating others on the right to vote. So I need each and every one of you, because I put out a call to action in the middle of this presentation, and I said, I need each and every one of you to not only go and check your voter registration status using that link that Sora Little or Miss Little gave to you in this presentation. But there were 53 of us in this meeting. There are 57 of us now. I don't have 57 thumbs up. So I need each and every one of you, if you have not already, even if you think you know that you're registered to vote, you think you know because you voted there for the last 20 years, you know your precinct, please go and check. Put that thumbs up to let us know that you've done that. And then when you leave here today, I need you to go and tell your family, your friends, and everybody you know that they also need to go and check. Now, I want to talk to you about the questions on the ballot. As many of you know, Georgia is one of the states that allows state and county political parties to put advisory questions on a ballot to survey its voter base. Now, what some political parties use these questions to do, and you'll see when I talk to you about the specific questions from the parties, it's really to get an understanding of how many people are in support of a particular topic, so that when our legislators go back in session, they can say X% of voters who received that Democratic ballot voted in support of this issue. That gives them the support they need to go and represent us in the legislature. That gives the political parties the power, the political voice they need to go and represent us when it comes to federal legislation. So when we, particularly in Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, say that your vote is your voice, when you get to that ballot, those questions is another way for you to voice your support and of issues that are important to you, your morals and your values. So let's talk for a second about the questions that you may find yourself faced in Fulton and Clayton County. As Ms. Little mentioned, right now we have some elections that are going on. And so there are sample ballots, and I dropped in the chat, and I'll drop it again for those of you who joined us after I dropped the original links. There are sample ballots that you can go and look at. And I encourage each and every one of you, if you've not already early voted, to click on those links and go look at those ballots so that you know who all is on the ballot. And you know, sometimes, and we've done forums in the Atlanta Suburban Alumnae Chapter, for example, in Fulton County, we did a forum for the sheriff. We did a forum for the various county commissioners. But as we know, there are other important races, such as the judicial races. Go ahead and look at those sample ballots. All of the candidates who are eligible to that you can vote for on the ballot, and you can do your research in advance of going to vote. Because again, an informed voter is a knowledgeable voter, and that is a dangerous voter for people who want to suppress your right to vote. So don't just go in thinking, "Oh, I'm going to vote for the incumbent." Sometimes the incumbent may not be the candidate that's most in line with where your morals and your values and where you stand on the issue. So again, go and look at those sample ballots. But I want to talk to you specifically about the questions so that we can leave time for any questions you have. For Fulton County and Clayton County, the only questions for the Democratic ballot are from the state party. And there are 8 questions. And for example, the first question is polling voters, Democratic voters, on their thoughts about the assault weapons ban and banning large capacity magazines and closing the background check loopholes. As many of you know, from a federal standpoint, finally this past year, our Congress closed a loophole which was referred to as the boyfriend loophole. And the boyfriend loophole, prior to the Violence Against Women Act, used to provide that if someone was arrested for domestic violence and they were married, then that individual arrested was prevented from owning a firearm. However, if you had 2 individuals who were cohabitating but not married, that's the boyfriend, because typically it was a boyfriend, not that they were being sexist, but it's referred to as the boyfriend loophole because typically if you were cohabitating but not married, then you were not prevented from owning a firearm. And so for many years, through when Congress sought the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, they sought to close. Many states have not done that. So the very first question on the Democratic ballot for the primaries is polling voters, Georgia Democratic voters, on their thoughts on assault weapons bans, banning large capacity magazines, and closing the various loopholes. The second question relates to clean energy, or how we are as a community are going to respond to climate change and climate policy. The third relates to same-day voter registration. In the state of Georgia, we actually have a really good mechanism, and if you're familiar with the numbers and the statistics, the majority of Georgia voters who are eligible to register to vote are registered to vote. However, there are some states that allow for same-day voter registration, meaning on the day of elections, someone can show proof of registration, show proof of residency, and can register and vote the same day. So that third question is polling Democratic voters on same-day registration. Fourth is repealing the 6-week ban, in what we refer to as the heartbeat bill. And as we know, when the Supreme Court struck down the various protections and said that it was up to the state, that states get to decide what reproductive services are offered in that state, it became that much more important that we are controlling that as a state. And, you know, in the state of Georgia, obviously the heartbeat bill passed. It was challenged in the courts, but it currently stands. So that very fourth question on the Democratic ballot is asking Democratic voters if we would like to repeal the the 6-week or the heartbeat bill. Fifth is school vouchers, using public funds to fund private vouchers. Six, raising that minimum wage in the state of Georgia. We know that economic justice centers on ensuring that if you are working 40 hours a week, that you can afford affordable housing and that you have a living wage. Well, we know in the state of Georgia, until we change the minimum wage, we don't have a living wage. So we're trying to poll, not we, sorry, excuse me, because Delta Sigma Theta is not partisan. I was speaking in my personal capacity when I said we. What the Democratic Party is attempting to do is to poll Georgia voters, Democratic voters, on raising the minimum wage to a living wage. The seventh question is related to involuntary servitude of incarcerated individuals. We know the Constitution says that involuntary servitude, i.e. slavery, is unlawful. However, if you are incarcerated in a facility, you can be required to work for less than minimum wage. So that seventh question is related to that. And then eighth, and this is super important to voters in Fulton County and Clayton County because we see it every day, is what more the state can do related to affordable housing and ensuring affordable housing. So those are the 8 questions if you receive the Democratic ballot that you're going to have, and you'll be polled when it comes to voting in this primary. As Ms. Little mentioned, if you get the nonpartisan ballot, there are no questions. There are no poll questions on that ballot. And because we are a nonpartisan organization, I wanted to also make you aware that if you choose a Republican ballot, you are going to receive, depending on if you're in Fulton County or if you're in Clayton County, you'll either receive 17 poll questions or 8. So in Fulton County, there are 19 questions. 8 of them are party questions, and it's the first 8 questions that you'll see in that Fulton County ballot that Ms. Little has pulled up are the same 8 questions that you'll see on the Clayton County ballot. In Fulton County, because remember I mentioned when I first started that you could state and local political parties can include these ballot questions. So the Republican Party has the 8 questions across the state, and then in Fulton County, the Fulton County Republican Party has 11 additional questions. And as you can see from the questions that are on that sample ballot, in Fulton County, that or just looking at, again, if we just look at the first 8 questions, the Republican Party is asking things of its voters, such as sorry, hold on. Oh, I just missed my. The very first question: for future elections, do you want hand-marked paper ballots, scanned and verified by hand, count on live stream? So this is going back into the issue of voter suppression or voter identification. Second question relates to legislature. Should the legislature enact a fair tax, replacing the state income tax and state sales tax with a consumption tax? So that's the second question. Third question: should the legislature ban registered lobbyists from serving on state election boards? Fourth question: should the Georgia Republican primary have a closed primary, meaning only registered Republicans would be allowed to vote in the Republican primary? Fifth, should public officials who allow illegal migration to occur be held responsible for crimes committed by illegal aliens? Just again, this is not a partisan statement, but just looking at the words used, you know, how these questions, what they're trying to obtain with these questions. Okay, so 6th question, would you support a statewide vote to allow gaming in Georgia, to allow voters to decide the issue instead of politicians in Atlanta? 7th, currently hundreds of thousands of hours and dollars are spent every year cleaning up voter rolls. Would you support an amendment to the National Voting Rights Act that will require registered voters to renew their registration every 4 years? I don't need to say anything else. 8th question, and this is statewide. Do you believe unelected and unaccountable international bureaucrats like the UN-controlled World Health Organization should have complete control over management of future pandemics in the United States and authority to regulate your health care and personal health choices? So those are the statewide questions that are going on that ballot in the state, in the county of both Fulton and Clayton County. And then, like I said, if you go to the Fulton County sample ballot, again, you can go to the link in the chat. There are an additional 11 questions for Fulton County Republicans that relate to eliminating the state income tax, vouchers for private schools. One question, do you believe biological men, even if dressed as women, should be able to use women's restrooms, dressing rooms, and locker rooms? So again, I encourage you all, regardless of which ballot you choose to vote on in the various primaries, to go and look at those sample ballots, educate yourself on the candidates on the ballot, but also the questions on the ballot. Because remember, the way the various political parties will use the responses on the questions to the ballot will be when they're under the gold dome and they're trying to demonstrate that they have the public support of legislation they are pushing. And then I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to say, Delta Sigma Theta is a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse any political parties. We do not endorse any candidates. However, we endorse the people who advocate for the issues that impact our community. So you can always go on our website, www.asagdst.org, to get additional information about voter registration, voter engagement activities that we have coming up. I encourage each and every one of you. We had 22 founders for our organization, so I don't miss an opportunity to ask anyone to reach out to at least 22 people over the next couple of weeks. Encourage them to register to vote, to check their voter registration, to ensure that they have reviewed a sample ballot. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sora Little. And if you have any questions, we're happy to receive them now.
Okay, so we were now, because I know there were some folks who said they did have questions. And so I see Miss Kiana Robinson. And so if you do have questions, please just use the raise your hand feature so we know to be able to call on you and you can get your question answered. So Miss Kiana Robinson, you can come off mute.
Hi, good evening. This has been very informative, especially about all the change legislation. It was mentioned that knowledge is power, of course. So what are some non-biased resources that one can use to look up the candidates and learn more about them?
So Reyes, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So for some of the local elections in Clayton County and Fulton County, you can go to our website. We had various candidate forums, and it was on, some of those forums were on fire. You can go and you can view those forums, and there's been press in the news. You can Google some of those candidates. For example, there was criticism of certain candidates who refused to show up at forums, not just ours, but other forums in Fulton and Clayton County. But you can go and watch those forums and see where they land on the issues that may be important to you. Like I said, we recently had a forum for Fulton County Sheriff that was very informative for the various Fulton County commissioner races. We had a forum in Clayton County for some of the races out there in Clayton County, including sheriff. As I think some of you know, the former sheriff, the forum that we had happened the same week that the former Clayton County sheriff, who had been incarcerated for his constitutional violations during his time serving in an official capacity, had just been released. You can go and educate yourself there, but I would also encourage you to go to those candidates' websites, see what their platform is, and educate yourself on where they stand, and if that aligns with where you think that candidate should be, or where you expect that elected official to be in terms of what you would want from your candidate. So the information is out there. Again, search the internet, find any forums that are publicly available. There are going to be some forums that are probably still going on down to the wire. If you can, attend those, and then search their websites and where their platform should be available to you, so you can make an informed decision on which candidate best represents you.
And then also there are some nonpartisan organizations that will put some things on their websites to give you sort of a one sort of glance at how you can see who's on the ballot, what's on the ballot, and it'll take you clicks to what Ms. Reyes is saying as it relates to those candidates' website. Ms. Jones, you can unmute.
Thank you. Definitely a lot of great information this evening. My question had to do with the new law where you said that it had to be tabulated by 8 p.m. Were there additional resources that were provided by the state for that? And is that something that only staff do, or poll workers? Are they able, or volunteers able to help ensure that that 8 p.m. tabulation is made?
So no, there were no resources additionally given in the budget for counties to meet this requirement. So that was some of the complaints about this bill, because you now will probably force election offices to hire more staff that can help with tabulation. This would not be something a volunteer would do. This would be something that our paid staff that will be working with us will be able to do, and that will be across any county election office. But because that requirement, all those laws that I went over, those are that is for the state of Georgia, so not just Fulton County. But so that is going to be something that we all counties will be having to figure out how they're going to create that resource to ensure that we can meet that deadline, to ensure that all of the advanced voting and all the absentee ballots that have been received prior to that Tuesday of election night are tabulated by 8 p.m. on election day. Okay, Ms. Bynes.
Thank you so much. This has been incredibly informative. My question was, given around the updates on voting access, are there any resources or tips or platforms on how to improve accessibility or inclusivity in the voting process? I'm thinking around senior citizens or individuals who may have limited mobility or lack of transportation, difficulty obtaining identification documents. Would welcome any additional information around that.
So yeah, some of that goes back to when I was saying what my division does earlier. So our voter education outreach team, we actually do go out to the senior centers, and we do sort of try to partner with our some of the organizations that for those who are disabled to go out to show them how to use the equipment, show them what's available to them, so that if they are disabled, that they know how they still can be able to have all the rights and privileges of every other voter. And then I will definitely tell you, we have in Fulton County, we have resources that we created for our disabled citizens. And so if you go to FultonElections.com and sort of scroll through some of those boxes within our website, you can find those resources. And then I also created a brochure. That is one for folks who work with me and our deputy. I know we have several deputy registers on here. I pretty much have tried to create a brochure for everything that you can think of, whether it be if you were a felon, if you were homeless, if you have a accessibility issue. We have all of that information so that everyone knows what is available to them. And I'll be happy to, I guess I should put some contact information in the chat, and you can send an email, and I'll be happy to get you some of those resources.
Thank you.
And so I would also add, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, we are very engaged in voter mobilization and actively partnering with a number of organizations across the state of Georgia to ensure that we are responsive to voter mobilization challenges as well as voter engagement. So we've partnered with organizations such as the New Georgia Rides to the polls. We've partnered with When We All Vote. And so again, be on the lookout on our website for opportunities to engage with us, to get that information out. We share information on our social media pages all the time, and not just the Atlanta Suburban Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, but any of our Metro Atlanta chapters, Atlanta Alumni, Stone Mountain Lithonia, East Point College Park, Henry County. You can go on any of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated web pages and even our regional web pages, and you'll find information on partnerships, particularly from now until November, on ensuring that individuals who need rides to vote, or if they need information on how to protect their right to vote, that it will be there and accessible to them.
Ms. Flanoy?
Yes. Hi, good evening, everybody. And thank you all for this great information. I have two questions. So one, going back to you mentioning, Ms. Little, about the precinct location. And even though we've verified on the website provided, I want to reiterate or make sure I'm hearing you clearly that we must go to that location. We cannot go to one, oh, I remember going to the library, a couple of years ago. We have to go to what's in our polling location on that website.
For election day. So I said election day only. So when we took the time and said, hey, everyone go into your My Voter page. So whatever is on your My Voter page is your precinct. If you do elect to wait to vote on election day, so coming up, that's May 21st. So if you wait to vote on election day, May 21st, then yes, you have to go to that location. Right now, early voting is happening in every county. And so right now you can go to any county, any location within your county in which you're registered and be able to vote early. The only time you have to go to that place that is showing on your My Voter page is your precinct is election day. You have to go to your assigned precinct on election day.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question, last question, is on the slide you mentioned, I think it's SB 129, where with the 2 hours, up to 2 hours off to go vote. Is that for only, city or state employees, like teachers?
That's the full state of Georgia.
Everybody.
Again,
okay.
Talk that over. Don't walk out those people's job now. Talk that over with your, because it's similar to the law we already have in place for election day. Like we have to, by law, you are allowed to go vote on election day. And so with this one though, they gave a time limit with SB 129. You get up to 2 hours off to go to advance voting. Most of the time, advance voting is for Fulton County for us this time around, because we didn't do Mother's Day. So we had 18 days of early voting. So during that 18-day period, you are planning your vote. You're going to figure out what day you want to go. And then you talk to your supervisor or management or, whoever in your company to say you want to go to be able to early vote. And you can point them to SB 129. You can always go to legis.ga.gov, drop in that bill, SB 129, and that way you can have it on printout to be able to give to your employee.
Very helpful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Sora King.
Thank you, Sora's great forum, as everybody said. I want to mention 2 or 3 quick things. Voter guide, if you go to the AJC, they have a great voter's guide. You don't have to be a subscriber, but AJC is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Just put that in Google AJC Voters Guide. It'll pull it up for you. Number 2, in terms of judges or judicial positions, GABWA, the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys, actually issues endorsements. So if you're thinking about who are some good candidates for judges and you haven't followed that, those judges are so important. We know that. Go to GABWA's page. And finally, Delta is super excited this year. I'm not sure when we'll start running in Georgia, but through a partnership with the Discovery Networks, we created a commercial about voting, a PSA. So we hope to have that out. It should be airing soon. And that's it.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Jasmine, I do not want to mispronounce your last name.
Okay. Hi, good evening. It's Shank. But I know there's an executive order in place. I think it's 13-166. But It's in relation to like oral interpretation for people who are not English proficient. And I know Atlanta is like having a lot of change in demographics. So in regards to all of the redistricting that is happening, is Fulton County doing anything specific in regards to like absentee ballots in regards to different languages? How often is that looked at or changed? And just is there anything specific to kind of reaching the masses since there is such a big change in demographics?
So I will definitely say Gwinnett County would be your model county for Georgia. And I think DeKalb County also had some language translation that they just started. But right now, Fulton County, even with the change in demographics, again, because everyone doesn't necessarily answer that census, that impacts things like this, because unless we're required by law, we don't do a special any special language things for anyone, because in Fulton County we have not yet hit that percentage for any other minority that we would need to have that, but Gwinnett does. And I know and they have a whole, because you basically have to run 2 elections, one in English and then they run in Spanish. And so Gwinnett has a lot of language resources available. We have yet not in Fulton County. We probably have theoretically, in terms of how many people are the demographic change and how many people live in Fulton. However, because everyone does not respond to the census and all the other different things that come into play to build that demographic report and that percentage, we haven't hit that percentage yet. But I do foresee probably sometime somewhere along in the future, we will start to do that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, it looks like I do not see any other hands. So I just want to make sure, are there any other lasting questions? We put some great information for you all in the chat. And we wanted to we tried to make sure and then look, it's 8:02. So we wanted to keep it at an hour, hit you with some good information. I did put my contact information in the chat. And so, and I don't know.
And Charlotte, I'm going to drop in the social action information as well. If you have any questions, you can email us directly at socialaction@asacdst.org. I think many of you know, but I'm going to also drop in ASAC's website that you can go and visit if you have any questions or just want to stay informed of what we're doing. The time is now for some social action. We say it all the time. We're going to, as the little kids say, we're going to get active. You know that little meme that's running around TikTok? It's time to get active. We're going to get active. So please do join us for opportunities to be engaged in this voter engagement, voter mobilization. The time is now. It's important to our community. And we're nonpartisan. I can't stress enough, nonpartisan. We don't care about political parties. We care about what they are doing to the people who look like us. So we need each and every one of you to partner with us. I can't stress to you enough. If I can just also just take a moment and just say, if you know someone or you yourself have benefited from student loan forgiveness in the past year or two, just raise your hand in the chat. This is an important issue that particularly impacts Black women. I've been scrolling the chat and I see it's primarily Black women in here. As we go and get educated, we are saddled with student loan debt that has impacted our ability to be homeowners. It's impacted our credit scores. Therefore, it's impacted our ability to receive credit at lower interest rates. These are issues that are important. Our economic development committee has been doing some amazing programming in this area, and we invite you to come and join us in the programming that they're doing. If you are worried about human trafficking, I invite you to look at what our International Awareness and Involvement Committee is doing. Our Educational Development Committee is working with students throughout our service area, Clayton County, Fulton County, to ensure that students are aware of what they need to do to be prepared advocates for the community. And if you are concerned about how Black mothers are treated in the birthing process and Black mortality rates, Black motherhood mortality rates, if you are concerned about the cost of prescription drugs and how racism has edged its way into our physical and mental health, then I encourage you to partner with us and come and join us for programming throughout the year. And then also, we're going to be focused on voter registration and engagement. So please do check out our calendar of events on that asacdst.org website. And we encourage you to join us for additional programming. With that sort of little, I'm going to hush and leave it to you to close us right on out.
Well, again, thank you all so much for those who are in Fulton County. And if you think this was something that your community needs, again, that is something my team does. My information was in the chat. Feel free to reach out. Also, there are several, if you're a deputy registrar and you're on here, raise your hand, put your reaction. There are several folks on here, deputy registrars. If you're interested in being a deputy registrar, and that means you as a concerned citizen want to be able to go out and assist in registering voters within Fulton County, then you can send me an email and I can get you the training schedule for that as well, so we can get you trained, because I need your help, because I hate to tell people no when they want us to come out. And so I'm able to pull on the deputy registrar that helped us go out to do drives. And so I see Tanisha Barrett at the top of the screen. Shout out to her, because she did one for us on a Sunday last week. And so I would have had to spend my Sunday. So that's what's good. We have our deputy registrar. So again, thank you all so much. I will turn it back over to Sora Butler, I see Sora Trammell is still here. So one of our executive leadership folks to close it out.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this evening and spending a good hour with us. Thank you, Ms. Little. Thank you, Ms. Reyes. And thank you to all of you for spending that time with us. I do see that our chapter president, Sarah Sabrina Clark, is online, as well as Sarah Tama Trammell. Just want to give them an opportunity to speak before we close out, if that's what they would like to do. So I would, I see them there. Do they want to come off mute and say something? If not, then we can go ahead on and wrap up. Let me see, I'm scrolling through the screen, so I don't see that they have come off mute. So with that being said, thank you so very much for your time. We look forward to seeing you at our next forum, at our next event, as Sarah Reyes so eloquently shouted out everything that we have going on. So have a great evening. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you for joining.